Hello movie barfs and welcome back to the channel. Alright folks, this is most definitely going to be an unpopular opinion, but it's been stewing in my mind for so long that I just gotta get it out there. While I don't think Logan is a bad movie, I just didn't enjoy it as much as how I'd expect to from the heaping amount of praise it got. I mean really, it seemed like everyone jumped onto the Logan bandwagon and was labeling it the best X-Men movie or the Dark Knight equivalent of the Fox X-Men universe. It's probably just me and my wayward opinions, but film is so subjective and I'm a firm believer that how you feel is how you feel. Better to be genuine and come up with your own opinion based on your own judgment instead of letting others dictate what to like/dislike. Most probably you'd disagree with me, and I'm sure you'd let me know in the comments below. On my end, I'll try to avoid going on a messy banter and instead provide some structured points as to why I didn't enjoy my movie experience of Logan. So here goes. And in case you missed it at the start, we're going into full spoiler mode from here on. Number 1, it's depressing and boring. Look, of course, not every movie needs to have a cheery tone, but my goodness, this movie sure was depressing. We find out that mutants are now extinct, with Logan and Charles being the only survivors of the X-Men. The once invincible Logan is dying for some reason, and the great Charles Xavier has a degenerative brain disease. They're broke and living like scavengers, and it's quickly established that Logan has 2 goals. The first being to die, the guy has just about enough of living, and the second to buy a boat so that he and Charles can live on the sea without hurting anyone. One goal is depressing and the other is boring. Most of the tension was introduced later with Lara and the pharmaceutical company chasing them, but ultimately the film is just one long road trip journey of Logan going to his death, which I didn't care for or wanted to see. The film constantly hammers home the fact that Logan just wants to die multiple times, and it makes for a very bleak and somber tone. Logan himself says it, Caliban says it, Charles says it, Lara says it, and when Charles gets killed later, Logan is pretty much aimless. He's then reluctantly dragged along for the ride by Lara to the supposed Eden, and the whole time it's as if he couldn't care less. The guy just looks grumpy and depressed in every scene, and sometimes it rubs off. It was hard to get invested into the movie when the protagonist himself didn't care about almost everything. And it's not that it's just depressing, it's boring too. The plot is basically Logan just being grumpy while a bunch of stuff happens to him. The pacing of the movie seemed off too, like that portion of the movie where they stayed over at the farmer's house. That dragged the movie a bit, and come on, that shouldn't have happened in the first place. It doesn't make sense that they were chilling at that point with a cozy evening. They should have still been running as fast as they could with that paramilitary organization hot on their heels. Number 2, this wasn't the Logan I wanted to see. This is probably me being a victim of my own expectations, but I wish they could have concluded Logan's character on a triumphant note. I wanted to see a Wolverine in his prime at the height of his powers in a solid storyline, maybe something like in Enemy of the State, and dare I say wearing some version of the yellow spandex. Not an old out-of-shape Logan who's coughing and depressed and getting his ass kicked by everyone, and also getting outdone by his daughter and his clone counterpart. He's a shadow of his former shadow here. A huge part of Wolverine's appeal is how much of a badass he is, just like how the Hulk's appeal comes from his strength and his ability to smash. When you take that away from Wolverine, it's almost like you're giving us a different character, and it didn't work for me. Like the main villain in this movie says, seeing Wolverine like this breaks my damn heart. And Logan is dying for some unknown reason, which we're never really told why. I mean, we saw an old version of Logan in Days of Future Past, and he was fine. So what's up with this Logan here? For someone who hasn't aged for centuries, it just comes out of left field that he's suddenly dying. He's been living with the adamantium for decades, and only now it's poisoning him? Also, despite being the title character, Logan doesn't have much of a character arc. He's pretty much the same at the end as he was in the beginning, except, of course, he's dead at the end. He's still the same grumpy and depressed broken man without having gone through any development. His relationship with his so-called daughter is hardly explored, and when he dies at the end, it's more relieving than bittersweet, since that was what he wanted all along. Number 3, it undoes the legacy of the X-Men. Logan isn't the only character who's a shadow of his former self. Poor Charles got the same treatment too. I mean, who wants to see the respected mentor of the X-Men get reduced to a foul-mouthed, blabbering, senile guy who ended up killing all the mutants he took under his wing? And there's even a scene where Logan has to accompany him to a toilet cubicle to pee. In the end, all the X-Men's efforts to send Wolverine back in time in Days of Future Past was all for naught, and it's sad that after surviving all the opposition from humans, they are just killed off by their own mentor. And in the end, mutation is just wiped out like polio? That's just sad. Charles's death was also very anticlimactic and an unsatisfying end for such an iconic character. I hardly felt anything when he died, and I think even his death in The Last Stand had more emotional impact. I think here, just as with Logan, you're relieved that he's dead so that his suffering is put to an end and he's no longer a threat to others. And I don't get why Charles doesn't use his powers here in this film. I get that the injections stop the seizures and the pills keep them from happening, but nothing is said about them dampening his powers. He could still use them on the horses after getting injected in Vegas and after downing the pills. There were many situations where his telepathy would come in handy, like this scene here where they were surrounded by all the soldiers. Number 4, Lara was a weak character. Look, Lara was dull. My main gripe with her character is that for some unknown reason, she chooses to be mute for the first half of the film. And you don't have a lot of character being developed when she's completely silent. She's just a silent killing machine, and I didn't feel much emotion for her. And then suddenly she starts talking only Spanish, and then fluent English shortly after, all without any explanation. If her goal was prove to Logan that Eden was real, then shouldn't she have spoken up sooner? Staying silent certainly doesn't help her goals or establish her character. And after Wolverine passes out from the fight with his clone, she suddenly is able to steal cars and drive? That's kinda convenient to say the least. And also, I must be overthinking this, but how does Lara grow up with an adamantium skeleton? It doesn't expand, so it will be difficult for her to grow taller. Number 5, the Atomium Bullet. For a film hailed as the best X-Men movie, it's sure iconic that they brought back a plot device from one of the worst X-Men movies, the Atomium Bullet. The movie establishes from the start that Logan can kill himself with an adamantium bullet, and I can accept that for the old Logan since his healing powers were diminished. But surely that shouldn't apply to the young Logan clone since his healing factor is still strong and we saw Wolverine survive an adamantium shot to the head in Origins. But that's the way they decided to kill off X-24, which doesn't make sense. Even if a part of his head was blown off, it doesn't make sense that he cannot regenerate it like his other wounds. Once again, the adamantium bullet serves as a convenient plot device to tie up any remaining loose ends. Overall, Logan wasn't a movie I hated, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment and boredom as I watched it, mainly stemming from the fact that I wish they could end off the character in a more dignified state, instead of showing a rundown, suicidal shell of his former self. And I just didn't really care for the characters in this one. When I ask myself if this was a story that needed to be told, I'm leaning more towards a no. And for whoever's gonna take over Hugh Jackman's role, he's got some pretty big shoes to fill. Ending it here, folks. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.